Happy Saturday to you. It is Wiley checking in live from the car. Sorry, I didn't mean to throw my forehead in there. I'm learning how to, video camera technology. That's what I'm learning. But I was thinking this is the Wiley Report where I talk about policies and how they impact people, me, you, us, be it policies, rules, regulations, laws, legislation, and the intersection of information, because that's what the policy is. And how does it affect us? The interesting thing, though, was I was thinking about is this topic as it relates to this report I was hearing on the BBC News yesterday, and they were talking about Malta. And Malta is this area in Europe, and in Malta it's illegal and a crime to have an abortion. And they were talking about the challenges that this law presents, because one, while they are anti-abortion and there's a law that literally says, it's illegal to obtain these services, that law does not necessarily mean that, one, people are not interested in the service. Two, the challenges of what do you do when you're a healthcare provider and you just want to help your patient, or you just want to help the individual. This is what they choose to do, or this is what they want to do. They made this decision and you want to do that, but you can't provide the service because you'll lose your medical license and face criminal charges, along with the woman and or individual that's identified as female. What about their needs? What about their desires? What about what it is that they want to do, and how there are these different grassroots organizations that have been springing up and continue to exist all along, that are trying to advocate for women, individuals who identify as females, health needs. And think about that as it relates to information policy, because they were saying, that's the interesting thing about Malta, is that they have other laws that are more progressive, but around this issue, they're like, nah, we're not gonna change this law. And even though they won't change it, they were saying it still exists. For example, they highlight, like with COVID and lockdown, they saw more cases, more individuals that are interested in obtaining this service. And just because it's illegal does not mean they're not going to seek that out. And then that in itself opens up a Pandora's box of issues, because what happens if people are getting this done and it's not safe, or there's a concern about individuals that are female or women's, emotional well-being, period, in how it makes them feel, the social implications of this law, as well as the emotional, mental, financial issues and implications that come along with this law, as well as the reality that, this policy affects, a lot of people. Or how does it affect healthcare providers, in the sense that they were saying, like with the morning after pill, that there are specific places and that, even though it's a drug that can be carried, they call them conscientious objectors, say they're not going to carry it because they just believe it's wrong, that you shouldn't do that. Which makes it interesting too when you think about healthcare providers, because it's like, yeah, you often think about the statement of do no harm is at least a part of the Hippocratic oath. But it's like, while I say that or use that as a paraphrase statement, there are healthcare providers that believe that conducting abortion is harming, or they talk about the way information is used and applied in communities where there are these videos that they talk about, what it means to get an abortion, and they basically start telling people this, they tell females this, or individuals that end up identified as female at age 15 and watch the videos in efforts to dissuade individuals from, obtaining or being in this situation. Yet we know that doesn't necessarily work. And I think oftentimes what comes to mind is values, ideas, how our beliefs drive our life, not just in abortion, because I know there are people that see this and be like, well, abortion is my thing, I've never had that experience, I don't know anything about that. And that's fine, that's cool, I get it. But I think about that. But think about, how when you have an idea, or when you have something that someone is desiring to do, what belief drives, what value drives that. Because oftentimes when you have this conversation, or when you talk about this topic, then the conversation becomes pro-life people versus pro-choice people. I'm a person that always believes in pro-choice. It's your right, your ability. I think you should have the ability to choose what's best for you. I should not be able to come in your life and tell you wrong for doing this, you wrong for doing that. I don't get to can make that decision. Because while I can have the opinion that something is wrong or I don't really care for it, I don't necessarily have to live with the implications of that decision. And that's what I often think about when we talk about abortion, is that you have people making decisions and saying, hey, I believe in pro-life, but they'll create no resources for the life to be sustained. Or I believe in pro-life, but they're not involved in the day-to-day decisions that affect that particular individual. And while we're talking about abortion, when you think about that, this type of logic can be applied to other areas of life. Think about that in terms of right now, vaccinations and masks, and how there are people that are like, hey, I don't want to wear a mask, hey, I'm not gonna get vaccinated, you can't make me. And I'm like, hey, I would never try to make an individual get vaccinated, nor would I try to make an individual, wear a mask. Yet think about your decision on that issue doesn't just affect just you. Whereas, depending on something else, that may or may not be true. And oftentimes people don't have these conversations, or people don't necessarily think about it, and they just go on around and they live their life. And then you're constantly looking at laws and things that are happening, and you're like, well, people are having these conversations and they're making these decisions that affect other people. And the challenge or the issue is that particular decision may or may not affect you at this time, but later there could be something that is going around, an issue, an idea, a belief, a law, a policy that does affect you later. Because I was having this conversation with friends, we were talking about how, like, we don't necessarily know about infrastructure support or the way it's set up for vaccinations outside of Illinois. I mean, I know in Georgia, my parents and family members have gotten or had the ability to obtain a vaccine. But there's true that there's still certain people that are like, hey, they're not gonna do that. In Illinois, where my wife and I work, well, the university has said, they offer the vaccine. We were able to get vaccinated. And while things are more open, school classes will be starting, students will be returning and or have already returned. The conversation becomes, okay, well, what do you do about the individuals that are not going to get vaccinated? Because that's still a choice. You don't have to have one. They flat out said, you don't have to get vaccinated. But if you're not going to get vaccinated, then guess what? You're going to have to get tested for COVID twice a week. That's what their option is, because they're realizing, or the statement is, that there are real reasons that people choose to not get vaccinated. Maybe it's their religious beliefs, maybe it's that it'll something else. And regardless of whatever the reason is, it's like, hey, I want to support your right to make a decision for yourself and not require you to do something. And I just think about that in terms of so many things that go on in our life and how policies impact people. But yet there's some policies that create issues and challenges, and they're disparate. And that some people feel really just in making a decision for another individual and saying, hey, you can't do this. But why do you say that? What's the belief that drives that? And is that belief true? Is that belief just? Is that belief fair? Is that belief equitable? Or is it just for a certain group of people? And how do you have conversations, and how do you move the conversation or shift it so that you think about the laws that you create, or think about the rules and regulations and policies and procedures that you create in states and countries, and think about how can you make those in a way that still allow people the freedom to choose, and still allow people to make the best decision for themselves, even if that's a decision that you do not agree with and that you do not support. How do you do that in a fair way? Because I was thinking about that too in the context of masks, because I was seeing a guy was posting about how he's totally for the fact that people may or may not get vaccinated. But so if you don't get vaccinated and you're in my presence and you don't wear a mask, what about my safety? Because that decision endangers me if you're in my presence, does it not? So how does freedom, your right to choose, your ability to make your own decisions, affect others in those contexts? And I think oftentimes people, they'll say, well, I do care about other people. Or then there are other people to be like, they don't really care about nobody. They just care about them and what they're trying to do. And hey, I'm not judging. I'm just saying that's, a real mantra. of individuals, a real mantra of beliefs. And it doesn't necessarily mean vaccine or mask. That could be anything and everything. But just think about those things. How do those things affect us on a daily basis? Policies, how they affect people. Thanks for tuning in. I'm Wiley. I'm signing out. Know about policies. Know about how things affect you and your everyday life and the people around you. And will your response, your action, will it change depending on what it is? Have you thought about why it is that you believe what you believe about specific issues and the way it shows up in everything you do and everything you are? Think about it. Good day. Peace.